Recording in progress.
All righty, we're recording. We're doing this another minute message with Micah. This one is Philosophy 101, an introduction to philosophy. Before we begin, let's have just a quick moment of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you for this audience. Bless this time and use this for your gain, Lord. Amen. All right. Today I'm going to talk to you all about philosophy. And this is a dedication to a friend of mine who works around the oil and gas industry and is a fellow technician that I worked with. I had the privilege to work with this gentleman, and I hope he sees this and I hope he gets something out of it. But with that, philosophy. And as Christians, it is very, very important. And it doesn't sound like, well, what do I need to know philosophy for? It's foundational and paramount to what we believe and how we think and understand things. So in this class, Introduction to Philosophy, we're going to define some terms and vocabulary, and we're going to talk about Plato's cave very briefly. And this is just a good foundation for philosophy. So with that, let's get into it. All right. Philosophy aims to ask and answer the questions of life. What is truth? And if we go back to the Bible, Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? Right? What Pilate, a Roman governor, a man who's in high position, did not know what truth is, or he questioned what truth was. Right? What is truth? Well, what is the truth? What is morality? What is morality? Define what morality is. What are morals? What is moral? Right? Where do, where does it come from? Where does morality come from? That's an important question. And different answers will dictate what you believe, and people act upon what they believe. Yes, they do. What is good? What is evil? What gives me value as a human? Do humans have value? How valuable are people? Are some people more valuable than others? We're going to get into it. Is murder wrong? Is it? Is murder? You don't like someone, you murder them. Is that wrong? If it is wrong, how do we know, right? Are there absolutes? What is an absolute, right? You got to define the term before you can define it. If so, who makes the rules? We're going to get into this. And there's a million more philosophical questions that we can ask, but just generally speaking, and this is just an introduction, it's a 101 class, if you will. Real simple stuff. These are the questions that people have asked for millennia, thousands of years, and still seek an answer for. Just like I said, what is truth? Pilate asked about truth. Thousands of years later, people are still seeking an answer. Philosophy is not always correct. No, it is not. It's philosophy. It's not always correct. There is bad philosophy. I'm sure as kids, we've heard sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We know that to be absolutely not true or false, right? Because words have more lasting consequences and impact than someone throwing a stick or a rock at you, right? Sometimes it's like, it'd be easier if they would have just thrown a rock at me and been on their merry way. It's bad philosophy, but it's a philosophical statement nonetheless, right? There is bad philosophy out there. So that's that. All right. Intangible concepts are philosophical. Anger, betrayal, evil, freedom and liberty. That's a philosophical concept right there. right? What is freedom? What is liberty, right? To what extent is freedom, right? Hate, jealousy, justice. That's a good one. That's definitely a philosophical concept. Love, revenge. You know, they're not exact. Are they emotions? Some of them, right? Like no one has a freedom, an emotion of free. Oh, I'm feeling freedom right now. I'm so freedom. No, no, it's not an emotion. It's a philosophical concept. Some of them just also happens to be synonymous with emotion, right? All right, so I put this together here. This is just a general outline of philosophy. Now, the goal of philosophy is to prove, I put that in all caps, prove to others your way of thinking is correct and true. It's typically displayed in a public debate in front of an audience, right? And I have a link here. I don't know what link this is, but we have questions of morality. Well, we got philosophy 101. That's a big umbrella. Questions of morality, right? What is morality? And then when you break that down, there's objective and subjective morality. And then based on that, you're going to build on your belief system, right? Questions of truth or absolutes. And then within philosophy, because you're going to observe truths, right? Facts, statistics, data collection, cause and effect. Those those are going to build upon your belief system. And then you got, your tools, logic and reasoning. Then with those tools, you learn how to critically think for yourself. And believe it or not, a lot of people do not know how to think. They know what to think. They know what to be told what to think, and they think what they're told, but they don't know how to think for themselves. I believe a lot of that's by design. And then once you know how to think for yourself with logic and reasoning, you can form arguments for what you think and believe. And so all that comes in play with your belief system. And then you have your belief system. You will certainly come across someone else with a different belief system that will challenge your beliefs, right? And then it's like, I didn't think about that. If you're a reasonable, rationale person, and then you'll go back, you'll rethink what you think. You might change what you believe, right? Reconsider it if you're wrong, and take it back to a debate, right? But if you can, and that's the whole purpose of debate, and debate is a good thing. Yes, debate is a good thing. You'll see that there's a certain, faction of people, especially in America today, that do not want a debate. And I'm gonna click this link just to see what I don't even recall putting this. Oh yes, yes. I'm glad I did click this. Okay, I'm gonna share this with you. I am definitely gonna share this with you. Here's what a debate is. Okay. 5 minutes. Okay. Hang on here. Is this even recording? I don't know. I think I gotta share screen to this right here. Share. All right. Yeah, we're gonna play this. In this debate, an atheist claims that he will. Yeah, I'll let you read it. It's a gotcha mic drop moment. This is a debate using logic and reasoning. All the things I just laid out.
The origin of the Christian. Maybe they came up with this idea. Because the skeptical scholar doesn't think Jesus predicted his resurrection. They think those predictions were written back in after the fact. If you accept that Jesus did predict his resurrection, then you've got to also accept the historicity of the empty tomb narratives, the appearances, and so forth, because those narratives are better attested historically than the fact that Jesus predicted his resurrection. You see the point? If you accept the predictions, then a fortiori, you've got to accept the empty tomb and the appearances. And thus, I think we have good reason for believing that Jesus rose from the dead and was who he claimed to be.
Now, as for the experiences, the appearances of Jesus, Dr. Craig said that I deny these. I do not. I do not deny that the disciples had an experience which they interpreted, which they took as being an appearance of Jesus. I think they probably did. Well, how do we account for that? How can we say that they could possibly have had such an experience? Well, once again, he very far too quickly and dismissively disregards the explanation of hallucinations.
I think that this is really the central issue between us, because you do admit these early disciples had some kind of dramatic transformative experience that led them to believe now that their master was alive again, that he was not dead, that he was risen from the dead. And that's I'm sure you'd admit again too, this is a extraordinary belief that's very un-Jewish. It's very odd. And so we want to know, one of the points that I'm making is we want to know what's the origin of these men coming up with this belief, which they believe so strongly and so sincerely that they were willing to go to these hideous deaths for it.
How do you believe that it could not have been a hallucination? Surely you know from the things I've said and from the extant literature on the nature of hallucinations, which I assume you've investigated, that hallucinations, as I've said repeatedly this evening, are often experienced by people as being extremely real. Furthermore, as I said in one of my rebuttals, precisely the conditions under which we expect people to have hallucinations are those which undoubtedly were being experienced by the disciple. Extreme sense of alienation, an extreme sense of loss, a terrible reactive depression. It's been pointed out many times that, gosh, 1/3 to over 1/2 of the people who have been bereaved will have a waking hallucination of their loved ones that they have lost.
Yeah, but then they don't conclude that they're risen from the dead as a result of that.
Well, why not?
But they, I mean,
remember, of course, they don't conclude that they are risen. Well, I'm not sure. We'd have to check and see. So once again, his extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and in no way implies a bias against the supernatural. It's simply an application of a rule which we use in our daily lives.
But you're saying that when you say extraordinary, really what you're saying is no amount of evidence would convince me of these extraordinary claims.
Sure it would. If tomorrow morning, immediately after breakfast, suddenly there was an earthquake, and a silvery light shone in the sky and the leaves dropped from the trees, and I dashed outside, and there, towering over us like 100 Everest, was this giant figure with lightning playing around his Michelangeloid face, and he pointed down and saying, "Be assured, Keith M. Parsons, that I do in fact exist, and I'm sick of your logic chopping." Dr. Craig, I would join you in the pew of the church, in the front pew of the church the next Sunday.
Be going to the question and answer period. We're going to go to the question and answer period, so be going to the microphone.
You don't think that you would have said, "Boy, I was having a hallucination."
And the crowd goes wild. That is a mic drop moment right there. Right there. So let me share my screen back to PowerPoint right here. There we go. Okay. Twiddles. Technical difficulty. Oh my goodness. Is this a touch screen? This is awful. I don't know why this mouse disappears on me. Okay. So I hope y'all heard that. But you can see within that debate, right? The guy kept talking about this. And the other guy, the Christian, he used logic. He listened, right? It's not attacking. And when you're debating, you're not attacking the person, you're attacking the argument, right? And that was a very civil and formal, proper debate. We need more of that in America. But once he basically took the guy's his opponent's logic and reasoning and completely just turned it on its head and the crowd went wild, it's because people see that there was a flaw in his reasoning. And it's just like, he basically just said, your whole argument is null and void. Here's why. And everybody saw it. So anything that guy has to say, like, his points are mute and invalid because it's like, because you're wrong, right? So if you have any kind of self-reflection or introspection, you would be like, maybe I am wrong. And then you go back to critical thinking for yourself, right? Your belief system's challenged, critical thinking for yourself, you form arguments. Maybe it's like, my arguments were null and void, right? But that's the goal of philosophy. That's the goal of philosophy. And when you have a strong foundation of philosophy, you are better equipped to stand up for Jesus, right? Okay. All right. So this, we need, like I said, we need to find terms. This is straight from, and I'm proud to say I have a paperback dictionary. This is straight from my paperback dictionary on page 633 from the 1950s. Philosophy, right? Philosophia, literally the love of wisdom. The love of wisdom in actual usage, the science which investigates the facts and principles of reality and of human nature and conduct, right? Why do people act the way they do? Why do people do the things they do? Principles of reality. What is real, right? Is this just a simulation? Is this just the Matrix? Or is this really real? And there's a judgment after this, right? So if I can move myself here, the love of wisdom. I think I'm just stuck in the corner, but that's the love of wisdom is what it says right there. And then I'll put myself right here. The science which investigates the facts and principles of reality and of human nature and conduct. Science, real science. The science which comprises logic, right? Practical or moral wisdom. Notice highlighted moral wisdom right there. All right, so let me go back here. Practical or moral wisdom, that's that. Okay, so science. Real science. Let's define science. None of this pseudoscience, none of this new age science, none of this science falsely so-called science. It's a noun. As a noun, science, something observable and measurable that can be repeated and yield the same results, right? All objects fall at 9.8 meters per second squared. You can take that to the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, eastern, western hemisphere, you're going to get the same result. That's science, right? And there's different sciences. The science of biology. The root word bio means life, and then ology is the study of life, right? DNA, I think I've covered DNA fairly decently for my level of education in my previous messages, the image of man. Yeah, you should check it out if you haven't checked it out. It was a good one. The periodic table of chemistry, right? This is physical. Systematic knowledge of the physical or material world gained through observation and experimentation, right? Like nitrogen and oxygen, gases. You can't see nitrogen and oxygen, but you can take it, you can compress it in a sealed system, and you can see a pressure spike, right? You can have an empty pressure vessel. If you compress like an engine, an internal combustion engine, you got a piston that comes up There's nothing in the chamber. You just got a piston stroking up and down, but there's air in there and you can compress it. And with a gauge, you can measure it pressure. You can measure pressure and temperature, right? So chemistry, physical matter, molecules, atoms, if you will, right? That's a real science. Physics, right? Fluid under pressure is undiminished in all directions. Like we know this, right? Yeah. So we know physics is something. Astronomy. Now, astronomy and astrology are two different things. I say astronomy, right? Observable. You can take a telescope, which is a scientific wonder in itself, and you can magnify your view into the nighttime sky and look at the stars, right? That's a science right there. Like we know there's stars and constellations in the heaven. We know that, right? That's astronomy. It's observable. We can see it. And then something near and dear. I used to work in an oil field corporate company. It was a blue and white one. I'll let you figure out which one that one was. But there was natural. It's a real science, right? This is the science, like real things. That's science. So observable, measurable, that can be repeated and yield the same result. Systematic knowledge of the physical material world. Science. Gained through observation and experimentation, right? Sometimes, and science asks questions. It poses questions, it makes predictions, it tests those predictions, and sometimes they're wrong. That's okay. That's science. Science can be questioned and should be questioned. If you can't question it, it's not science, right? Even if it's settled science, like gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. If someone says, I disagree, all right, well, let's test it, right? Let's test it. It's, what does science got to fear, right? And this is coming from Dr. Frank Turek, and we'll talk about him later. But he says, science doesn't say anything. Scientists do. Science is just the data, right? Real science pursues to find universal truth of the physical world, or as we call them, laws, like Boyle's law. I kind of skipped over that one. Newton's law, right? It's unproven. To make it law, it's got to be unproven for 100 years, right? Documented and unproven for 100 years becomes law, right? So, and I don't know where I heard this, but this is a good one. The truth is like a tiger. You don't have to defend it. Set it free, it will defend itself. That's the truth right there. Yes, you don't have to defend it. The truth will defend itself because it's the truth. It can't be disproven. It's not wrong. It can defend it. If you have to defend the truth, well, let me think about that for a second here. If you have to, I should say, if you have to censor, that's what I'm looking at. If you got to censor those who object to your truth, that's not the truth, right? If you get my drift here in recent events that happened in America, yes. All right. So then we talked about knowledge, systematic knowledge of the material world. What is knowledge? Knowledge is knowing, to put it simple. It's acquaintance with facts, truths, or principles as from a study or investigation. General erudition. Look that one. I looked that one up too. That's a new word on me. I looked it up. General erudition. Yep. It's just knowing, right? Knowledge is knowing. Knowledge is knowing. And then wisdom. Now, what is wisdom compared to knowledge? Well, isn't wisdom knowing to know? Wisdom is the quality or state of being wise. Okay. It's knowledge of what is true or right, coupled with just judgment as to action, discernment or insight. Sagacity. That's another word. Sagacity. Look up that word right there. Sagacity. Wisdom puts knowledge into practice. Knowledge is knowing. Wisdom puts knowledge into practice. Or another way to say it, wisdom is knowledge applied. A pastor of mine said that. And it's like, that's a great definition for wisdom. Knowledge is knowing. Wisdom is applying that knowledge. All right. Simple example. Like I said, it's a 101 class. Knowledge is knowing. Look both ways before, and anybody watching this will say you cross the street, right? We all know to look both ways before you cross the street, right? And we always look left, then right, then left again, right? That's knowledge. That's knowledge. But knowing and doing are two different things, right? Wisdom puts that knowledge into practice by actually looking both ways before crossing the street. And you can see these little girls, they're being wise. They were told something, probably by an elder, no doubt, more than likely. Look both ways before you cross the street. And when they're out in the real world, they're taking what they've learned, what they know, and they're applying it. And that makes them wise, right? That's wisdom. And it sounds overly simplistic because we all know to look both ways before we cross the street, right? Like, Micah, this is, you're boring me here. Stay with me here. It sounds overly simple. However, knowing does not make you wise. Case in point, you're not going to convince me that this man does not know to look both ways. This man knows to look both ways, but did he do it? Clearly not, right? What's he doing? He's being a zombie, right? That man is a zombie. He did not look both ways. Clearly, he did not, right? Some people say that's a stupid man right there. It is possible. All right, one could argue this man is a fool, not a wise man to say the least. Yes, not a wise man. That's not what he did was not wise. He did not put the knowledge into practice. Clearly not. All right, so Plato, a Greek philosopher, and he came up with the allegory of Plato's cave. And when I was introduced to philosophy as a senior in high school, I was 18 years old, 17, 18, on the brink of being 18 years old in high school, 12th grade English. Miss Moore, my 12th grade English teacher, the woman was a PhD. She had like 10 or 11 certificates, degrees, like licenses on the wall. She was a smart woman. And at the time, I didn't really appreciate the wealth of knowledge that she was. But she introduced us to Plato's cave. Like she just barely got our toes wet with philosophy right there. She taught us Plato's cave, and we referenced Plato's cave throughout. All right, so this philosophical concept lays a great foundation for an introduction to philosophy. And here's a good picture of it, Plato's cave. So you got some people chained up, you got a wall, people casting shadows on the wall. There's a fire right there that casts the shadows. And then if you fast forward, someone's gotten out of the cave and sees real light, right? So I'm going to click this. I'm going to share. I got to switch screens here, kind of going back and forth. I think that's it. Yes.
Said life is like being chained up. What is reality? Knowledge, the meaning of life. Big topics you might tackle figuratively, explaining existence as a journey down a road or across an ocean, a climb, a war, a book, a thread, a game, a window of opportunity, or an all too short-lived flicker of flame. 2,400 years ago, one of history's most famous thinkers said life is like being chained up in a cave, forced to watch shadows flitting across a stone wall. Pretty cheery, right? That's actually what Plato suggested in his Allegory of the Cave, found in Book 7 of the Republic, in which the Greek philosopher envisioned the ideal society by examining concepts like justice, truth, and beauty. In the allegory, a group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals and other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing they're perceiving actual entities. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside for the first time. The sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds the new environment disorienting. When told that the things around him are real, while the shadows were mere reflections, he cannot believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually his eyes adjust until he can look at reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally at the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen. The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery, but he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. The other prisoners think the journey has made him stupid and blind, and violently resist any attempts to free them. Plato introduces this passage as an analogy of what it's like to be a philosopher trying to educate the public. Most people are not just comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile to anyone who points it out. In fact,
That's all we need to do right there. Yep. So let me share. Go back to PowerPoint here. That one right there. Share. Okay. So yes. So just to recap, I know it happened quick. A group of prisoners have been confined in a cavern since birth with no knowledge of the outside world. They are chained facing a wall, unable to turn their heads, while a fire behind them gives off a faint light. So all they can see is just this wall, right? And just a faint light right there. They have a very limited view of reality, or what I should say, a very limited view of the world around them, right? Very limited view. Occasionally, people pass by the fire carrying figures of animals or other objects that cast shadows on the wall. The prisoners name and classify these illusions, believing that they're perceiving actual entities, but they're not. It's just a shadow, right? They're not seeing the real deal. Suddenly, one prisoner is freed and brought outside of the cave for the first time. And the sunlight hurts his eyes, and he finds his new environment disorienting. So, the sunlight, it's bright. Anyone seen a movie in the summertime from a movie theater? You're in this dark theater, and then you go outside, and it's like, oh man, it's bright out here. It's like that, right? It's a new environment. Like you're no longer in the dark, cool AC. You're outside in the bright, warm, sunny day. Totally different environment. When told that the things around him are real while the shadows were mere reflections, he can't believe it. He can't believe it. His world has just been shattered, right? His world has just been crashed. His world came crashing down on him, right? He can't believe it. The shadows appeared much clearer to him, but gradually, over time, being in this new environment, seeing a new world, getting a different world view over time, his eyes adjust until he can look at the reflections in the water, at objects directly, and finally the sun, whose light is the ultimate source of everything he has seen, right? The sun is what reveals everything. Like, can you imagine the delight and joy that this man has now? The prisoner returns to the cave to share his discovery. Sure, he's excited, like, hey, let me show you this, right? Like, you gotta believe, you gotta see it to believe it. But he is no longer used to the darkness and has a hard time seeing the shadows on the wall. And this is the key right here. This is it. This is the hard hitting truth of this allegory. The other prisoners who still have a very limited worldview think that the journey has made him stupid and blind, right? And you can take that in multiple levels, like blind because he can't see in the darkness anymore, and blind like he just can't see. Can't you see? That's a dog right there, as they're pointing to the shadow. They think the journey has made him stupid and blind, and violently resist any attempts to free them. They don't like, this is my world, this is my little bubble. Don't mess with it. I don't want to know the truth, right? I don't want to know that there's a whole nother world out there that challenges my worldview. They get angry. Most people are not only comfortable in their ignorance, but hostile towards anyone who points it out or challenges their worldview. That's why debate is such a good thing, right? It challenges your worldview. And the whole purpose of debate, it's not so much the person you're debating to change their mind, but there's people watching, listening, and they may not know, because people, they don't actively seek truth and knowledge. They don't. They do not, right? And especially like, hey, if we're going to make a decision as a group or a culture or as a nation, shouldn't we have debates on the best way to proceed forward with certain things, right? Like going to war, right? Shouldn't we? Or major policy changes in the nation on how we do things. It's very important to talk about these things. We don't talk about them. We don't debate anymore. All right, so we got a bunch of prisoners in the cave. They can't see behind them. You got the faint light behind them. This guy gets free. The sun hurts his eyes. He's told something totally contrary to what he's believed and is known. He's observing it for himself, science, observable, measurable. He doesn't believe it. It's like, this can't be, because this challenges what I've known. Over time, he sees that what he's seeing is in fact the truth. He sees it all. He understands it. He wants to share the good news. And going back to the old world is confusing. It's just like, huh? And then the people that he associated with in his old world are hostile, angry. They don't want to hear it. You get off of me. And he ends up getting, thrown into a brick wall with, seeing stars. And people, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They are comfortable in their ignorance, in their worldview. They're happy with it. But it's like, hey, I'm trying to tell you the truth. Let me tell you some truth here. They don't want to hear it. And that's it. That's it. That's class one. Real simple. Class one. We will explore that later. So I'm trying to keep these short and sweet here as much as possible with getting the information in. This has been class one. Hope you got something out of it. I'm going to end this right here.